on and about this great achievement.
Many thanks, and it's an honour to be here this evening. Many thanks, and it's an honour to be here this evening in these extraordinary times in which we live. Thank you.
Just tell us a little bit about how you came to be here at St. Stephen's and what your normal worshiping life looks like.
I'm a minister in the United Reformed Church, and I was ministering in Hackney half-time while I was working on the PhD. And because my husband was worked at the Houses of Parliament in IT, we bought a flat many years ago in Westminster. And when we moved on from Hackney and I retired nearly 2 years ago, we couldn't sell the flat because of Brexit, the estate agent told us. And so we decided to move in the flat, which it's a flat we really like because it's up 4 flights of stairs without a lift. And so that's a slight challenge each day. And so we're looking at selling it again. And because there isn't a United Reformed Church in this locality, we went around and looked at 1 or 2 Anglican churches and came to this one and thought we felt at home at this particular church. So I do take services at other United Reformed churches from time to time. And we also are planning to move to Ealing and are members of St Andrew's United Reformed Church there. So that's eventually where we will go when we can eventually sell our flats and move. But at the moment, it's great to be here at St Stephen's.
It's classic of the it's wonderful for you and it's sad for us if you ever move to Ealing. It's lovely to have you here. And you mentioned the PhD briefly. What was your PhD on?
It was looking at the Holy Spirit and worship. And it was looking at this from 2 angles of a 17th century Puritan divine and a contemporary Orthodox writer. And I think when I have read these 2 over the years, what I've been struck by was their congruities between the Reformed of the 17th century and contemporary Orthodox in a way in which you'd never think there could possibly be similarities in a way because of our differences between the different Christian traditions. And I was just intrigued to work on this more and dig into it and do some research and look into it and work on a PhD. And it did take me 9 years part-time. It took me about the first 2 or 3 years to work on it more than 25% of the time because of the call of the local church. So I never quite got up to 50% of the time. And I submitted it on the very last day that it was possible to submit it at King's College in London where I was doing it.
That's not good news for the deadline oriented among us. And now that PhD has been turned into?
I now have a book, The Holy Spirit and Worship, and Transformation and Truth of the Theologies of John Owen and John Zazoulas, who are the Reformed and Orthodox theologians. And I tried in this to look at something that's of research that's contemporary, which says that the church is growing amongst Pentecostal and charismatic congregations, and that the Holy Spirit, I was intrigued to read, has gone over to the Pentecostals and charismatics. Now, actually, I don't believe that at all, because I believe the Holy Spirit is present in every part of the church, and that's part of God's gift to us. And I wanted to look at a kind of different approach from the charismatic and Pentecostal approach that is faithful to the traditions which are more traditional, as it were, and to see what they still have to say to us today. So to say that we don't actually have to go off and become Pentecostal in order to know the Holy Spirit. It is possible that week by week, in our usual worship, we can know the Holy Spirit and grow in our life with the Holy Spirit.
What's the process like of turning a PhD into a book? Is it mostly cutting? Did you discover anything new in the process of transforming it from one genre to another?
Well, it was slightly astonishing, to be honest. I was at a conference of the Society for Systematic Theology and browsing amongst the books that were on sale, and I got chatting to one guy who was responsible for one bookstore, and I said to him, "Oh, I've just finished a PhD, and one of the things I'm kind of wondering about is getting it published." And I thought I was just saying that to him to make polite conversation. But he said to me, oh, why don't you send me a copy of your PhD and I'll have a look at it. And from then on, it got accepted by Stock, which are American publishers. And I was completely amazed. And what I had to do is actually get typesetting underway, because it's a different order of formatting in a PhD as in a book. So what I really had to work on was not so much the content as the formatting of it. And I, to be honest, employed one or two people to help me with this, because it felt like it's beyond me, these technicalities.
Fabulous. I got distracted by thinking about formatting, which is terrible. Another question that was just on the edge of my mind. So one of the things that you're so keen to emphasise is that you come to the Holy Spirit through worship. And of course, at the moment, our worship looks quite different to how we would normally be worshipping with the Zoom and the lockdown. What do you think that you've learned that can really apply to where we are at the moment?
I mean, one of the things I think I've really learned is that Zoom is God's gift to us, in fact, and does connect us with one another in these times, and that we don't have to be physically present, even though that is, I believe, the best way forward is to be physically present to one another. But there are many other ways that we can encounter each other and encounter God, and that Zoom or Microsoft Teams or the variety of ways of being online are also God's gift to us. And in the United Reformed Church, we had a big debate about Holy Communion and can we celebrate Holy Communion in these lockdown times. And it's been actually left up to the congregation, which is part of our tradition, to decide. But one of the things we've said is that if we believe the Spirit is in every home that's on Zoom, and that when the President breaks the bread and pours the wine, it is possible for people in their homes at the same time to hold up bread and to hold up wine when the prayer of consecration is said, and for us to trust that the Holy Spirit is still at work in that bread and wine, and that we can share remotely because of the Spirit's work. So that, I think, was a big insight, which previously we thought, well, the Holy Spirit can only work when we've got the physical bread and physical wine in the physical presence of the congregation. But that was a kind of another insight, which is not to say that we think that's going to be the way forward in the future, but it does open us to the way the Holy Spirit leads us and guides us in different directions, depending on the changing times in which we live.
It's been fascinating because, you know, of course, here in the Church of England, we've been having a lot of similar debates, about how Zoom changes things, how it doesn't, how we access the grace and the sacraments. Do you think that there could have been more ecumenical dialogue around that?
And to be honest, one of my big disappointments about COVID-19 as a whole is it felt like the churches had the opportunity to come together more and think about things like communion and things like worship and things like how do we reach out to this troubled world as local congregations. And there was a bit of me which just felt I was really sorry that we didn't act together more across our traditions. Now, I know there have been some times of prayer and some statements and so on, but I visibly felt we could have had a really regular prayer time across our different traditions, and a sense of let's engage together. Where is God in this pandemic? And what is it saying to us today about who God is? And how can we make statements to the country about where we still believe God is with us and with God's people? And how can we equip ourselves better to reach out in service to others across the board? So it was a bit of a disappointment to be honest, that we couldn't act more together across the different Christian traditions.
And so it's to bunker down, isn't it, into your own bubbles when things get tricky, whereas actually it's possibly the time we should be making more connections. And where do you think, I mean, this is asking to be like a crystal ball, where do you think the Holy Spirit is going to be leading us as we come out of all of this?
I think the really good thing about the Holy Spirit is that I can trust but not know. And so I can trust that if I place my life in God's hands and in the Spirit's hands, and then open to new possibilities where the Spirit might lead, then the Spirit will lead wherever God makes possible. So I think that's more, I don't feel I know where it's going next. I mean, my hope is that the church will be actually, after these pandemic times, more confident about what we stand for, because it's really come home to me about what word we have to speak to our world in such a troubled and suffering time, that God is with us and God's love does surround us, however dark the times might be. So my hope is that we can strengthen our faith and speak more of it into our worlds. But in terms of the sort of practicalities, I'm waiting for the Spirit to lead us.
Wonderful. And where can we get your book?
Well, I do have a number of copies myself, so I'm very happy to let people have a copy. And they're £17 if I have to post them, £15 if I can give them in person. And on Amazon, they're £29, so it's a reduced rate if I give them. And you can also look on the Whitford Stock website, and there's a 40% discount if you feed in the word worship into the little box under the book's title.
And I'll leave a copy at the back, so if anyone wants to take a photo of the cover or something to take away and look for it, then you can do that. Is there anything I haven't asked? Anything else that you would like to say?
I mean, I suppose in a way, one of the things I was interested in this is that kind of revisiting the Trinity. So it's not only the Holy Spirit, but how we understand the Trinity and relationality that is God's gift to us. And it seems to me that's in a generation or in an age where we live in a kind of me kind of culture, to say that we find our life by being in relation to God and to one another. That was quite significant as well in what I worked on for this book, and one of the gifts I hope we can bring to our world.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Well, I'll be inviting Elizabeth back at the very end to say our final prayer, but thank you so much. It's wonderful for you to come, again, as I say, all of you to come out in this cold to speak to us, and I'm sure that if people wanted to ask you more, then you'll be around.
And I'm certainly very happy to engage and to have copies of the book made available. So it's an honour for me to be invited here this evening to speak, so thank you for that.
You're very, very welcome. I look forward to hearing from you again at some point in the future.
So wonderful.
Thank you.